We are working on arrangement. And in class, we talked about how arrangement is taking your ideas that you have in your Annie chart, things that you've already done research for, and putting them together, finding ideas that support one another. They're kind of friends, they hold hands, they work together, right? So ideas that just kind of are working in the same direction. And we talked about how to take all of that information from our Annie chart and create groups. And those groups are essentially your proofs. And I'm going to walk through a different story just because I don't want to do all the work for you. You have to do your Sleeping Beauty, Annie. But I'm going to walk through this story, Little Red Riding Hood, kind of quickly a review about how we sorted and how we grouped and how we created proofs. Work with me here a little bit, just walk through this in terms of review. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to take all that information and put it in an outline. We will be using outlines for every essay. And so it's very important that you learn this from the get-go, that you understand how to take information and put it into an outline. And it takes practice, and you might not get it perfectly the first time, but we'll keep on working on it. We'll keep on practicing. So let's take a look at this Annie chart. This one is for Little Red Riding Hood. And the issue is whether Little Red Riding Hood should have stayed on the path. As you know, probably from reading this story when you were younger, that Little Red Riding Hood needed to go bring some bread and some wine to her grandmother who was ill. And her mother sent her off down the path to go to her grandmother's house. And of course, the big bad wolf comes along and he persuades her to leave the path. If you've read the original Grimm story, that's kind of what happens. And she does. She leaves the path. And the issue here is whether she should have stayed on the path. And so I've got my Annie chart here and already had filled it out and then did what you did in class today, sorted it. So I took all of my information and created groups. And how we did that was we started at the top, the very top of the list. And I ignored all the negative right now. I just kind of covered that up, maybe a piece of paper, and I'm just focusing on the affirmative only. So for the affirmative only, the first thing I had was that she was young. So then I went down my list and I read everything on my list that would kind of match that, be a friend with that, support that, go with that, like kind of work together. And I really didn't find anything until I got towards the bottom. She was young and then she was alone. I felt like that really kind of jived with she was young. Like it's not really smart for a girl to be alone and young somewhere. So I definitely grouped those two together. And then because I did that, the wheels are turning in my brain and I gave it a name. I called that just a young girl for now. And later I can change that, but for now it's just like my working proof. That's what I wanted to start with. So she's just a young girl. And then the next one on the list was that she had no one to guide her. And I definitely felt like that one in that she was just a young girl category. The reason this is like the fourth thing that I identified down here is later in my thinking, I decided it was maybe the least important of my proofs, and I liked the other ones better. And you only need 3. So when I was done going through the whole list, I went back to the top and I started at the next one. And it was her mother told her to stay on the path. Well, immediately my brain is like instructions, obedience. Okay, so that's kind of the theme of that idea. So I'm searching for that. And I went down through the list and I found the Bible says to obey your parents. Bells going off, ding, ding, ding. Those two to go together. So I highlighted it yellow and I gave it a name. So the name I gave it was Obedience to Her Mother. Pretty simple. And so as I keep going down the list, I'm looking for anything else that sounds like obedience or following instructions. And sure enough, the next one was instructions are meant to be followed. So I lumped that right in with that group, obedience to your mother. Not sure what to do with that one. I just skipped it. And then I found another one. She told her mother she would take great care. Those are actual words from the story. I'll take great care. So she told her mom that she would pay attention. Listen. So all of those I definitely felt are a group called Obedience to Her Mother. And that's going to become a proof for me. And I really like that one. So I'm going to stick with it. And then I went right back up to the top of the list. So I had green, I had yellow, And then as I was highlighting, I started off with this one, she could break the line. And I thought, okay, that sounds like all the bad things that could happen if she leaves the path. And then I thought, dangers for leaving the path. So I started looking for anything dangerous that could happen or anything that might happen as a result of her leaving the path. And I thought, well, she might get lost. So I highlighted that pink because that goes with that. And sure enough, I gave it a name, Dangers Off the Path. As I kept reading down that list, I found she could be late in getting to her grandmother's house. It's not really dangerous, but maybe a result of getting off the path. And so I lumped it in there. And then down here, she might forget what she's supposed to do, get distracted. She might get lost. So all of those for me felt like they were dangers off the path. And then in my thinking, I kind of changed my thinking a little bit later. And I really thought, maybe those are just problems or possible consequences. So my wording is going to change, and that's okay. That can happen. And then there was still left some to be sorted. And we're only going to do this with the affirmative because this is just review. And in class today, you did this with your affirmative and with your negative. So I still had things that were not highlighted yet. And I started at the first one and that it was grandmother is ill. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to be looking for anything to do with grandmother. Grandmother needs the cake and wine to make her stronger. Boom. Those two went together for me. And right away, before looking for anything else, I called it grandmother's needs. I went back to my list and I kept going down the list. I'm looking for anything else about grandmother's needs. Well, here you go. Grandmother is weak. Grandmother was expecting her. So as I went through my Annie chart, and I really only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I have 17 things in this affirmative column. It's kind of nice for sure to have about 20 things. And usually when we do invention in class and we're doing definition, this one, and comparison and circumstance and relation and testimony, we usually generate that many ideas. So you shouldn't ever have really a shortage of things, but every once in a while you'll have something that you're not quite sure what group it goes in, and that's okay. See, I have one right here. Not quite sure where that goes. All right. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through and do the same thing in negative, but that's what you did today. You did both sides. What's next? All right. So I'm going to give you a visual. Do you remember having a Slinky when you were a kid? Did you have one of those? I loved my Slinky. We used to put it on our stairs and we would make it. You probably did too, right? You start at the top and you kind of start it going to the next step and then it goes down and down and down. That's fun. But another thing that people love to do with the Slinky is to take its original shape and just whoop, 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 whoop. And the Slinky expands. It gets bigger. That's what's going to happen with your essay every single time you write one. So last essay was super short and I handed those back to you, and overall they were great. You guys did a good job. And I told you it was going to be the most boring essay in the world because you're not really saying much. I wanted to start with the basic Slinky, but now our Slinky's going to go whoop, and it's going to get bigger. And I want to talk to you about how that's going to work. All right. As I went through this process, I definitely leaned toward affirmative. And sometimes you do issues and you're not sure which way to go. There's so many good reasons for affirmative and there's so many good reasons for negative, and you're kind of pulled and you're not quite sure how to make a decision. But for this one, I was for sure leaning affirmative. And after doing my sorting, I definitely feel like, yep, that's where I'm going to land. So for this essay, I'm only working with the affirmative information. I can cover up the negative. I can fold my paper. I'm only working with the affirmative. So to remind you the issue, whether Little Red Riding Hood should have stayed in the path, yes, Little Red Riding Hood should have stayed on the path. And I decided to look at my proof groups that I made, and I'm only going to pick 3. And I decided I liked these 3, and this one's great. And it could show up in I can use this language in like maybe my introduction, right? Somewhere down the road. But for now, I'm just going to stick with those first 3 proofs. dangers off the path, her grandmother's needs, and obedience to her mother. All right. So I took those and I lumped them with my thesis words. Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path for 3 reasons. Do you remember what that is? That's that enumeration phrase. For 3 reasons. And then I'm going to use a colon right there, this guy, and I will list my proofs. And I decided that I really felt like that, well, I'll show you later. I put the dangers involved, her young age, and obedience to her mother. Okay. I gotta change that because you know what? I decided to change my mind and I went grandmother's needs. So I'm gonna, and you can do that. It's all part of the thinking process, but I forgot to switch that. Grandmother's needs. And maybe I should say her grandmother's needs. There. Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path for 3 reasons. The dangers involved, her grandmother's needs, and obedience to her mother. Well, you know what? I also changed my wording there. I put possible consequences. So I'm going to change it here too. Now let's see if I got 3 solid things. Possible consequences. There. I like that. Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path for 3 reasons. Possible consequences, her grandmother's needs, and obedience to her mother. Excellent. Moving forward. Now I decided to write out my proofs. So I have proof 1, the possible consequences. And then I wrote down the 3 subproofs I liked the best that went with possible consequences. Subproof 1, she could get lost. Subproof 2, she might get distracted or forget. And I can add more words later, but this is just to help me know what my proof is. Subproof 3, she could break the wine. This right here, we're about to slinkify it. In the last essay, all you wrote were your 3 proofs. So you would have said in the body, the first reason Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path is because of the possible consequences. The second reason Little Red Riding Hood should stay in the path is that her grandmother has needs. The third reason that Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path is because she needed to obey her mother. So your body only talked about your proofs. Well, now each proof is going to be its own paragraph. So now what just happened to the body of our paragraph? Or our body of our paper. It went from 1 paragraph that listed the 3 proofs, because that was just a start, to now 3 paragraphs in the body. Does that make sense? We expanded it like a slinky. So each proof is going to get its own moment to shine. Each proof is going to get its own time in the sun. So proof 1, I'm going to name the proof. The first reason Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path is because the possible consequences. I could even add words a little bit if I want. The possible consequences that she could endure. And then I'm going to list the subproofs. And that's my paragraph. And all total, I'm going to have like for sure 4 sentences. It could be more because I might break this up. She could get lost, or maybe she could get hurt. She might get distracted and lose her way. In addition, she might forget what she's supposed to be doing. She could break the wine, and the bread could crumble, and grandmother would have to go without. All right, so this is going to be a paragraph all by itself. We'll do that later. But right now I want you to see that it's going to expand. So hopefully we had time in class to write out your proofs and your 3 subproofs. If you didn't, what I probably said to you in class is to watch this video and to pause it when it was time and to write out your proof and the 3 subproofs you pick to match your proof. Now the proof is just what you named your group when you started to group all your ideas together. So the first one would be possible consequences. And I put all the things that could happen that could go wrong together in one group. And those become the subproofs for your possible consequences category. So I want you to make sure you write down your proof, your first proof, and then the 3 subproofs you pick to go with it. And then I want you to write down your second proof and the 3 subproofs you picked to go with it. And then I want you to write out your third proof and your 3 subproofs to go with it. So I read you proof 1. Proof 2 would be her grandmother sneezes. Her grandmother was expecting her. Her grandmother is weak and ill. Her grandmother needs the bread and wine to make her stronger. And I got those straight from my Annie. They're right here. And I picked them and I wrote them down. Now, if you need to pause the video and do that, take the time to do that. Make sure you have your 3 proofs, and underneath each proof, you're going to have 3 subproofs. So feel free to pause the video, take some time to do that so that you have your proofs and your subproofs in front of you. Because when we go to make the outline, you need to have them in front of you. And maybe we had time to do it in class. And if we did, awesome. And we can just keep on going. But if we didn't, because who knows how our time's going to go on a day, then go ahead and pause and do that. All right, let's get to the outline. If you have your Lost Tools of Writing book with you, open it up to page 15, or you can use the handout that I loaded in Google Classroom. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll just make sure I send that off to Mrs. Anderson so that you can have a physical copy in front of you. I'll do that. So if I handed that out to you in class yesterday, but for me, it's several days from now, make sure you have that in front of you. If you have to pause the video to do that, do that. Get your outline sample in front of you, that template, that arrangement template, or your book on page 15. They're the same thing. So either one is totally fine. I just want to make sure you're covered. All right, you're going to make your own outline. At this point, I prefer that you write it by hand. That will eliminate all the having to tab on a piece of paper. I've got my auto, I'm not very techie, so I don't really know how to turn off all this auto format stuff. So handwriting it is probably the way to go. If you like to type it up and you're techie, go for it. If you set up your work, of course, you're going to do your header just like this. The student is Debbie Powers. That's my mom. Don't tell her I put her in my class. And then you're going to double space. And so my name would follow. And then here's the name of our class. And hopefully I didn't forget to tell you that the name of our class, Great Books 1, you've got to cap that books because it's part of a name. And names are special. And we capitalize special names, right? We call those proper nouns. This is Great Books 1. So books gets capitalized. And then the date. And then the title of your homework assignment is centered in the middle. So yours would be the Sleeping Beauty outline. Notice on the outline, those bold sections. First, Roman numeral 1 says introduction, and you're going to write that on your paper. You're just going to write Roman numeral number 1, introduction. Underneath that, you're going to tab, you're going to do a little space, and you're going to have A, B, and C. Now note that A says thesis with an asterisk, and whenever you see an asterisk in our workbook, you're not going to see it in, real world. If you go up to college, your teacher's not going to give you an arrangement template with asterisks in it. This is just for our learning purposes. You're going to see the word thesis, and you're going to put your thesis in there. So mine is going to be, and I'm just going to do this for the sake of time, LRRH, Little Red Riding Hood. There we go. Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path. Those are my thesis words. My enumeration words are going to be the same as yours. Everybody's on the same page. Enumeration is just a listing of how many reasons we're doing. So I'm going to say 4, 3 reasons. And sometimes I tell students just to put that colon in there to remind you that has to go in your paper. That's one little piece of punctuation that a lot of people miss. But when you're going to include a list in a sentence that you make, having that colon alerts your reader that a list is coming. And then C, notice the word exposition. And exposition we talked about in class. Kind of that expose, to show. We're going to show our reasons. So you can just write the word exposition. If at any time you want to pause this video and kind of work along with me, go right ahead. That'd be brilliant. And then underneath exposition, you have 1, 2, 3. And it says proof 1, proof 2, and proof 3. So I'm going to go back to my work and I'm going to look. I kind of picked a working order and I started with the possible consequences. You can decide what order you want to go in with these proofs that you've made. That's your choice. You get to choose which is most important, which would I like to go first. You can do that. I picked the possible consequences. So I'm going to write possible consequences. All right. And then my next one was her grandmother's needs. So I'm just going to type that in. Her grandmother's needs. And the third one was, I don't know why it's doing that, obedience to her mother. All right. Those are my 3 proofs. And that's what your introduction looks like. And your outline should look just like that. Remember, I'm teaching you a shape, I'm teaching you a form, and we'll get to more fun stuff about writing that's coming. Okay, so hang in there. Right now, I'm teaching you form. All this right here, everything I'm highlighting right there, that's your introduction. That's it for now. But like a slinky, it's going to expand. It's going to get bigger. I'm going to teach you more things to put in your introduction. But that's it. Let's move on to the proof section. And how many proofs do you have? 1, 2, 3. So our ABCs line up with these ABCs right here. Notice they're all in a straight line, standing at attention or standing like a statue, all right there, right underneath these 3 ABCs. See that order? We want to do that. So what is my first proof? Well, I see them right there in the exposition, so I can just copy them down. Possible consequences. And what I might do is I'm just gonna write in my proofs, and then I'll do my subproofs afterwards. You can do it either way. You can fill in the whole A 1, 2, 3 first, but I'm gonna fill in my proofs. Her grandmother's needs, and C would be obedience to her mother. Why don't you go ahead and take the time to put those in your outline, pause the video and do your own, and then unpause it and come on back and we'll talk about subproofs. Unless, of course, we did this in class because we had just a wonderful amount of time and it worked and everybody understood everything, then this is just review. But Lord willing, you understand what we're doing and you're following along. So pause if you need to. All right, I've got my 3 proofs written down in the body of my paper. And now we're working with subproofs. This is brand new. We had not done this before. We did not do this with the last essay. So I'm going to work on my subproofs. So I'm going to have to look back at what I wrote up there. For this category, I put she could get lost, she might get distracted, and she could break the wine. So I'm going to go ahead and just put those in. She might get lost. She could get distracted. And then she might break the wine. All right, now I can expand on those a little bit as I go to write. And that's going to be the next lesson. But for now, we're just arranging our ideas. That's what we're focused on right now. Her grandmother's needs, I'll go one up and I'll steal those. Her grandmother was expecting her. Her grandmother was weak. Her grandmother needs the bread and wine. All right, so that goes in. And I might just shorthand it. Grandma expecting her. I can even put weak and ill. I'm going to remember that. And then I could put in she needed the bread and wine. Now, those are going to make really boring sentences, but those are just my reminders for my brain for what I need to write. And then last, obedience to her mother. Her mother told her to stay on the path. She told her mother she would take great care. And the Bible says, ooh, you know what? That bugs me. You want to capitalize Bible. Here you go, Mrs. Brand. Capitalized Bible. All right. Obedience to her mother. I have to go back now. I got sidetracked. Her mother told her to stay on the path. Okay. Her mother told her to stay on the path. She told her mother she would take, and in a story it says great care. So I'm going to even put that in quotes. And then the third one was children should obey their parents. And these are sentences. I'm not even worried about my punctuation right now. Or I think it was the Bible, right? The Bible. I think I said it differently. Children should obey their parents. I'll just add that. The Bible tells children to obey their parents. Okay, I can make a sentence out of that. That'll help me. Okay, so do you see how I just took all the subproofs for my 3 proofs and I put them in the outline? You're going to do that with your work. You're going to find your Sleeping Beauty proofs, your Sleeping Beauty subproofs, and you hopefully did yours along with me if we didn't do it in class, or you could follow along here. Each one of these subproofs are going to be their very own sentence. I'm not going to list them all in one sentence. So I've got at least 4 sentences here, at least 4 sentences here, at least 4 sentences here. That's a pretty basic paragraph, but we can start there. That's okay. And then, drumroll please, the last part of our outline is the conclusion. Yay! Conclusion. So let's follow the outline in the book or the paper that I gave you. Follow along as I work here. So it says thesis. I'm going to restate my thesis. So it's like I'm returning to the idea of my introduction, going back and reminding people what my thesis is. At this point, they probably should remember, but I'm going to put in my thesis. So I'm going to say, Little Red Riding Hood should stay on the path. Notice there's no enumeration in the conclusion. You do not include that here. You only include it way back there in the introduction. And then B, you go ahead and type in that word or write in that phrase, summary of proof. You don't have to fill anything in there other than what it says in the outline, summary of proof. And then you're going to list your 3 proofs, which are these: A, B, C. Possible consequences her grandmother's needs and obedience to her mother. All right, if you followed along and worked while we were doing that, or we did it in class, you have an outline for your very next essay. And every time we write an essay, we're going to go through 3 different stages. We're going to do invention, and that's how all that work we did in class, all that thinking we did in class, all that discussion that we did in class. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of notes on our issue and coming up with all kinds of ideas. And we're looking at those 5 common topics during invention. And we're taking the time to be intentional about thinking through all of those things, because then we have something to say. It's so hard to start a paper if you don't have something to say. So invention is all about creating and generating our ideas. Arrangement is where we're at right now. And that's about taking our ideas and putting them in some kind of order. Because writing a paper, you're blessing the reader if your paper is organized and it's orderly and the ideas all fit and work together. The fun part is the third part. So we have invention, we have arrangement, and then we have something called elocution. And that's an old word that just talks about your style, how you word things. And we're going to spend some time this year on elocution. So next week, when you come to class, we are going to work on a rhetorical device, a literary device, that is a tool that is great to use in your writing. And so each time we write an essay, I'm going to give you another tool that you can put in your toolbox to help you just become a better writer, a writer that uses literary devices, rhetorical devices that help your writing to just pop and to be interesting. So that's the next stage, is elocution. That'll be a lot of fun. So we'll do that next week in class. Next week, I look forward to seeing your outlines. Please bring it into class. If you wrote it out by hand, that is great. No problem. If you want to type it, feel free to do that, but it does have to be in class. We can't move forward without it. So make sure you bring it and you pack it in your backpack. God bless, and I'll see you on Thursday.